Sounds
Um,
good.
all right. So I'm going to go through a couple slides, and basically, I just want to set the expectation of what data quality means to talent. Um, so, talent data quality incorporates these 5 pillars. So, design, standardize, match, enrich, monitor, and then operationalize in that order. And it's cyclical. So, by design, what I mean is we have our unified platform, which we're able to use to detect anomalies, detect different statistics for the data, completeness, accuracy, things like that. So we're going to design a report around those types of indicators. Standardizing and matching. We have a built-in set. Okay, this slide is building out a little bit too slow, so I'm going to go back into the review for this. And that has to do with the WebEx sharing. So I'm not going to bother with the build out here. So standardizing and matching, we have built-in components to standardize the data, to format it, and to match and deduplicate it, so that you can get single sources of the truth in your data. Enrichment, we have more than 900 components or connectors now that includes data quality, connections, transformations, things like that. Monitoring, so monitoring and measuring your quality over time, so that you can improve your standardizing and enrichment operations, and then helping operationalize that so that when it gets to your analytics platform, it's accurate, it's timely, and it's usable data. So those are the 5 pillars that we focus around in our data quality. Now, the project steps, again, cyclical, 5 steps, and I'll talk about these in relation to job design, so it makes a little more sense. Discovery, so building out a report on the quality of your data, standardizing that data so it's in the proper format, matching and deduplicating the data across multiple sources, consolidating that duplicate data into a single source, and then monitoring the quality over time. So just remember this. I'm going to come back to it, though, and we'll look at the colors in comparison to it. And then what about this slide? So this is just what the kind of things we need to consider when doing data quality, so the different types of procedures that you may be implementing within data quality. So I'm going to come back to this slide in a minute. So, any questions so far? Pretty standard stuff. I'm going to walk through the platform now. So I believe when we last spoke, there was sort of this, up in the air about whether you guys want to do an on-prem solution, so install and maintain the solution yourself, or you want to do an iPaaS solution for this. So we're going to sort of talk about both in context. The one thing in Talon that is exactly the same for both is this development studio right here. It's part of our unified platform, and it includes all of those items that you saw on that little bar chart, where it's data integration, data quality, master data management, ESB. So everything is kind of packaged into a single environment here. Up at the top, we have our profiles. So we have the integration and the profiling that we're going to be looking at today. Profiling is where you start on that little circle, right? This is going to be the discovery phase of things. And then integration is pretty much everything else on there. It's going to be able to standardize, cleanse, dedupe, enrich, things like that. So you basically start profiling, and then you can build your processes from there. So just open up the profiling perspective. We have reports that you can build off of the different types of analyses that we provide. So I have just different types of analysis here. You can see we provide analyses for data, which the basic column analysis would be all-encompassing. So if you want to look at completeness, here, let me go to that slide. If you want to look at the considerations, completeness, consistency, accuracy, all of those things, you'll look to build a report around those items. So that's where we would start here with like the basic column analysis for those items. So let me just open up this company analysis. So I'm going to use and go back to this a little bit later on. We're going to focus on a data set right now, which is company, which kind of is just there to illustrate the different points of it. And then I built some revenue charts so you can kind of see how you would be able to customize analyses for specific needs. So here in my analysis, I'd pick a data connection. So we connect to pretty much everything. Under our metadata section, we have databases, files, Hadoop cluster. So if you have EMR on Amazon with S3, you can just connect to the Hadoop cluster, read Hive tables, things like that. So you pick a data source. In this case, it's MySQL. You select the columns that you want from that data source. And so you have all of the tables or views from there that you can choose from. And then you select indicators for those. So based on what you're trying to, again, identify: completeness, consistency, accuracy, conformity, integrity. So you select the indicators here from the list. And in this case, I picked a few indicators for company name, street address, and phone number. You have pattern indicators. So what type of pattern am I looking at for, let's say, the street or the phone number? If we go down to the bottom here, you have address patterns, street address, email addresses, phone number patterns, date patterns, things like that. So you're looking at consistency within the patterns. Completeness comes from like simple statistics where you have unique null counts, distinct counts that you can apply here, and so on. You apply the different patterns and indicators, and you can build out your own. I built out my own for like revenue so that I could use that and customize it. Any questions so far?
So these are kind of like rules. Pattern checks are rules that are applied on each row of these columns. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's applied across the different fields. And so we have company name. I'm going to pick some rules to apply to company name, and then it will create a report based on the rule. So when I run this, I picked pattern for my company name. So it's going to give me my chart here for pattern, and then I can view or inspect each of these types of patterns.
And so this can kind of give you summary stats about how many items don't fit a pattern. Like if you're expecting a phone number pattern or something, it'll tell you what type of data is invalid.
Right. Yeah. So for street address, an example here, it's telling me how many fit into the pattern and how many do not fit into the pattern as an initial indicator of consistency.
Okay.
Same thing with phone number. So this is actually, I didn't reset my database, so this is the better version of my data. I have a worse version, which we'll go over as well. And you build these out, and basically you run these reports when you're doing your data quality cycle. So just going back here to this one, right? The discover and monitor phase, those are all part of the reports that we're building during the data quality steps. Here is the library of patterns that we have. Again, you can customize your own. Here it's regular expression or SQL for different types of data. You can also do matching within the data and build out a deduplication algorithm for this. So this is my matching report for a data set. I'm going to say I want to match on last name and first name within a country, and it will give me an idea of how many duplicates I have within that based on my indicators. And you can add these all to a report, which you can generate on a schedule and have someone emailed that information. You can also generate alerts based on thresholds. If I want to set up a threshold that, on matching and say, I need a 99% uniqueness score, then it goes past that. I want to alert someone, we can do that as well.
Would you be able to see results of previous runs? Like how unique were the records yesterday, the day before, that type of thing? Or does it just show you the most recent results?
Right, so we have two options. It's snapshot and evolution. So evolution over time will just give you a little line chart that tells you over time how things went. So let me open up my here. So I have a couple of reports here. Let me open my latest one and expand that. So we have our snapshots here, highest revenue, and then we have over time. So you can kind of see the evolution of it, but you'll be able to go back in time because we generate these reports for you to save.
I see.
All of these statistics as well that are being gathered here and generating these reports is actually just saved on a database that you choose. So if I open this one up here, I can choose where I want to save it. So you can go with your own analytics tool and build out other reports based on that data.
Okay, that's good.
Then you can see here I've assigned these two charts, basic, which is my snapshot, and then evolution over time to a single report. Okay. Other questions around just the monitoring and design portion of it, design, discover portion of it. Okay.
I guess I just want to confirm one thing. When you run these reports to generate these summary stats, these are executed on the data store where the data, I guess it just lives, right? It's not pulling down the data into your infrastructure and then calculating the values.
Right. If it's a database, it sends a SQL query that generates the summary stats.
And you mentioned earlier this can also connect to things like S3 and Hadoop. So how would it work for that?
Well, for Hadoop, we can go against a Hive table. So you can build an external table around your data in S3, and just point that as your source. Point at this as that as your source here. So your connection would be to Hive. So I would change this to my Hive connection, wherever the heck that is. So many different options right here.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Feel free to interrupt anytime you have something. Not a problem. Okay. So now that we've discovered different anomalies, different patterns, different statistics about our data, we can move to cleanse the data. For instance, street address, maybe I need to standardize that more. Maybe I need to use an address validator to cleanse it. Phone number, again, same thing. Maybe I need to validate and cleanse that and get a better set of conformity within my data. So that's where we move into the integration perspective and actually start working on standardization, deduplication, and consolidation for data quality. You can go from, actually, just to point this out, you can go directly from the analysis to the integration perspective. For instance, I can build out a job directly from here, and it will give me a job that filters the data based upon my pattern. So I don't have to build anything from scratch. I can go from one to the other in a couple of steps. So within the integration perspective, we have different job design types. Standard, which is since we're a Java code generator, it builds out a Java job and runs in our execution engine. Big data batch and big data streaming generate Java code that is created using the Spark or MapReduce framework that will actually run on EMR and be submitted to the cluster. So we don't need any engine in front of the cluster or anything like that. It just generates the code, submits it to the cluster. So I'll give an example of that as well. But I'm going to open up my data quality. So going back to the slide here, I have my different pillars for data quality built into a single job: discover, standardize, deduplicate, consolidate, and monitor. So discovery is going to run that report that I just showed you with the initial data. So that would be something that I would generally do manually, and then build out the report, and then from there build out my standardization procedure. And then monitoring runs that report again. So within my schedule, if I'm running this particular process every hour, every day, I'm generating a report after the process is finished to evaluate my new quality standards of my data. Talking through each of these other steps, standardization. So here we have a component that calls a database table and gives me my data from that. We parse that out using a synonym dictionary that we have. We take the entity types of company names. So if I preview the data here, since it's company, you have things like LLC, corporation, whatnot. So we need to standardize that into a single format. So we can do that using our standardize component, or we can do that in data prep, which I'll get to. We remove fields, we send it to data preparation for further business logic and standardization, and then we go on to the next step from there. So just for the standardization piece, we utilize data prep to actually incorporate procedures that other business users have created, that other users have created, and that can be updated on the fly. So when we go to standardize in data prep, we build out a preparation or a recipe. So I actually used our Integration Cloud data prep, not the one on premise. So I need to come to our Integration Cloud interface here. So for data prep, this is our self-service tool, but can also be integrated directly into the data flows, like you saw there in my job. We can take data sets from virtually anywhere. So here we have local files, databases, Salesforce, Amazon S3, and even from a job, which means that you could take any source that we connect to. So if I look at the palette, we have sources of all kinds here, databases of all kinds, Vertica, Postgres, Teradata, everything. And you can build out a process that will allow data preparation users, self-service users, to view controlled data sets rather than giving them access to a specific set of tables or anything like that. So from this, basically I selected a sample of my data, my file, to build out a preparation. So I have this company preparation here that I apply rules to. So this thing is coming up. So here on the left-hand side are most sets of rules that I've added to this data set. So for instance, I'm changing the company name. I'm uppercasing it. I'm concatenating the company name with the entity type. So if we look at this data set where we have my final data that I've cleansed using these rules, formatting, removing extra characters from the street, and this is my cleansed data set with a previous data set, which I'll open, my original one. It's a little bit different. We have multiple fields. It's non-standardized, things like that. So I'm using that preparation in my process to get the data that's coming in and apply those rules to it. Pretty much dynamically. If I wanted to, I could change the rules on the fly and have that apply to the job, even if it's built and running. So we decouple that business logic that's implemented in data preparation, which allows you to be very flexible and agile with the rules. Updating them every time you need to, rather than recompiling a job every single time. So the way we apply rules here is by selecting a field, a value, or a set of data. In this case, this orange bar represents invalid phone numbers. So I would select that, and I would apply a function to it. So in this case, I have invalid phone numbers. There's even a city in here in this case. What I want to do is just clear the cells with invalid values, and that applies it to the data set. Now this is a cached data set, so it's not actually happening to the data that's in the source. It's happening to the data set that's in memory here. So you don't have to worry about it changing things while you're doing it on the actual data. And then I want to apply a formatting function to this. So submit that. And so again, I'm just applying business rules to each of these fields here. So you can pick from the charts as well. So if I wanted to pick all the entity types that are industry and I wanted to do something specific with that, I can apply the function to the filter industries. So this will allow users who are not familiar with a ETL engine to implement logic that can be placed into the flow of the enrichment, consolidation, and standardization procedure. Any questions on this? Okay, I'll take silence as a no.
Yeah, sounds good.
So that's where we get part of our standardization. It's from the self-service engine here. Once that's done, we send it out to the deduplication. And so for deduplication, we use a matching algorithm similar to what you saw in the profiling section, where we identify what fields we want as indicators for matching. We apply functions to it, like Jaro Wrinkler. I'm forgetting a bunch of them, but we have about 10. And using that to do an approximate match, so a fuzzy match on the data. We remove the unique rows, so anything that's not considered a possible match. So now we've isolated our data down to simply the records that are duplicates or multiples. And then we consolidate that. So we consolidate it using a component that applies rules to the groups of records here. So we give rules like most common, shortest, longest, most recent, most complex. And that will consolidate the multiple records down into a single record. So that way we can use just the best data from all of those. And then we write it back out to the target. And then from there, we generate our reports. Now all of these components are basically just drag and drop. I can take any component from the palette and add it directly into my flow here, and write the properties of that component. So you saw the query that I have in my input. Things like filters require me to place conditions in them. So very simple design for this. And now when I run it, so let me open up this. I'll get rid of my old reports here and run. So this is going to run locally since this is not a big data job. And basically, I would want to schedule this using our administration tool, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, it's going to generate my report. So I populated my data initially. I generated my discovery report. It's going through the standardization procedure, writing the data into data prep and using that preparation to format it, deduplicate it, and write the consolidated records into this table. And so I also generated 2 reports. So my first report being the report on the bad data. So we have differences here. Like there was one field that was actually pretty bad. It was misparsed when it came in. Phone numbers, none of them match right now in the initial data because I haven't formatted it. You kind of saw that in the data prep with the initial data set. And addresses, for instance, I have different patterns, like a lot of different interesting patterns for addresses and so on. And then it generates my final report, which we kind of looked at already, with the new patterns, new phone number patterns, and then the NA would be like null values here, and address patterns. And street address, now I only have 16% non-matching to my pattern, which may not indicate that it's an invalid address, something along those lines. Any questions on this process? Okay. So this one I kind of did for the revenue that generated all of my revenue reports. Basically, I'm just loading this database with random data and generating a report after it loads. So in this case, this would be similar to data streaming into a target and just running my report continuously to see how my data is actually being affected by the new data being loaded. So you could do something like this for staging, where you see your data evolving over time and generating reports every hour, every day, something like that, along with your data loads. Integrating with like the cloud and S3, things like that. We just do it through components. The